This is a story about power, a story about influence, secrets, and the shadows that lie between money and politics in America. But above all, this is a story about why the Epstein files, the thousands of documents, logs, memos, depositions, and classified reports, still matter today. Jeffrey Epstein did not rise to power the way most men do. He didn't build a company the world could see. He didn't patent an invention, or lead an army, or win public office. And yet, he accumulated wealth, access, and influence that extended into the highest circles of American politics. To understand why his files matter now, long after his death, we must understand the world he built. According to Britannica, Epstein's story begins in Brooklyn, New York. A gifted kid from a modest family who dropped out of college, but somehow landed a teaching job at Dalton, one of the most elite private schools in the country. And from that world of privilege, doors began to open. Doors that rarely open for outsiders. Epstein left teaching and moved into finance, where he displayed an unusual talent. He convinced wealthy men that he knew secrets. Secrets about money, about risk, about opportunity. According to biography.com, the most influential of these men was Leslie Wexner, the billionaire founder of Victoria's Secret. With Wexner's backing, Epstein acquired a mansion in Manhattan, one of the largest private residences in the entire city, a fortress with cameras, private rooms, and staff who answered to him. By the mid-1990s, Epstein had become a mystery wrapped in luxury. Private jets, private islands, private security, a man whose wealth came from nowhere obvious, whose network came from everywhere. But his properties tell a clearer story than his biography ever could. The Manhattan townhouse, described in documents archived on the Epstein Document Archive, was meticulously surveilled. Hidden cameras were installed in multiple rooms. Staff were instructed to observe without asking questions. Elite guests entered through doors that locked from the outside. At his private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands, Little St. James, AP News reports that employees were expected never to look Epstein in the eye, never to approach him unless summoned, and never to speak of what they witnessed. And on his private jet, the one that would later make headlines, flight logs show a rotating list of celebrities, billionaires, professors, models, and politicians. Some aboard once, some many times. To your grandmother, to anyone living far from this world, it might seem strange how one man could slip into circles of power so effortlessly, but power is not always earned. Sometimes it is lent. And Epstein borrowed power from the powerful until he built an empire of his own. His network included people from all political parties, from different countries, from different industries, not united by ideology, but by status. And that is why the Epstein files matter today. Not because they implicate one political party, not because they answer every question about his wealth, but because they reveal patterns. Patterns of who had access, who looked the other way, who benefited, and who didn't want the world to know. In 2005, long before his arrest, long before the world knew his name, the first cracks appeared. A family reported something horrifying, and that would begin a chain reaction that would lead to one of the most controversial plea deals in American history. According to CBS News, by the mid-2000s, allegations had begun to surface, patterns of behavior, testimonies from young women, and evidence that should have triggered federal prosecution. Instead, it triggered something else, a negotiation, a deal, a decision made behind closed doors. But to understand that moment, the moment that would define Epstein's future, we must understand the next phase, the first collapse. In 2005, the world Epstein built, the wealth, the secrecy, the network, met its first true threat. Not from a politician, not from a billionaire, not from a rival, but from a parent. A mother in Palm Beach, Florida, filed a report that her 14-year-old daughter had been taken to Epstein's mansion and paid for what happened inside. The allegations spread quietly through local police channels, gathering urgency with every step. Palm Beach detectives opened an investigation, and what they found, according to CBS News, was not a single accusation, but a pattern. Girls recruited from local high schools, girls who were vulnerable, girls who were promised money, $200, sometimes $300, simply to give Epstein a massage. And once inside the mansion, according to police reports, they were ushered upstairs, into a room with a massage table, into a room where Epstein waited. The detectives interviewed dozens of witnesses. Some were frightened, some were ashamed, some were angry, but their stories aligned. And so, in 2006, local police recommended felony charges. You might think that's where the story ends. That one man, however wealthy, is not strong enough to overpower the machinery of justice. But Jeffrey Epstein did not live in the same world as most people. As the case grew, something unusual happened. Federal prosecutors stepped in. Meetings were held behind closed doors. And what emerged from those meetings would become one of the most controversial deals in the history of American law. According to CBS News and Time magazine, federal prosecutors reached a non-prosecution agreement with Epstein. Not publicly, not in open court, but privately. So privately that even the victims were not told. Under the terms of the deal, Epstein would plead guilty to lesser state charges. The federal government would agree not to prosecute him. His co-conspirators would also be protected, and Epstein would serve a sentence that defied belief. A sentence that included 13 months in a county jail, with work release privileges that allowed him to leave the jail for up to 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. According to CBS News, he spent more time in his office than behind bars. For the victims, for the families, this wasn't justice, it was betrayal. One mother famously said, "This is not a plea deal, this is a cover-up." And many ask the same question we ask today. How does one man negotiate immunity not just for himself, but for those who helped him? According to documents later uncovered by journalists, one internal FBI memo, referenced by People magazine, suggests that Epstein had, at some point, provided information to the FBI. What information? About whom? Why him? Why then? Questions asked, but never answered. But there was another detail that mattered more than all the rest. According to AP News, the victims had no idea the deal even existed. They weren't told, they weren't present, they weren't considered. The law requires prosecutors to inform victims of major decisions. In Epstein's case, they did not. Years later, a federal judge would rule that the government violated the rights of those victims by hiding the deal. But the ruling came too late. The damage was done. Jeffrey Epstein walked out of jail in 2009 a free man, protected, wealthy, and fully prepared to rebuild his empire, and rebuild it he did. Because after the plea deal, after the cameras left, after the country forgot, Epstein's world grew larger, his network grew bolder, and his circle of powerful friends widened. According to flight logs published in the Epstein Document Archive, some of the most influential people in America and abroad continued to fly on his plane, visit his properties, and appear in his schedules. The plea deal had given Epstein something priceless: the belief that he was untouchable, and when a man believes he cannot be touched, he grows dangerous. In the years that followed, Epstein expanded his reach across continents and industries. He built connections in academia, in science, in fashion, in media, and yes, in politics. In the next part, we enter the global web. We follow Epstein through the decade after his plea deal, the decade where he became not just a predator, not just a financier, but a ghost that hovered around the corridors of power, a decade that made the Epstein files inevitable. When Jeffrey Epstein walked out of jail in 2009, he did not walk out humbled. He walked out emboldened, protected by a secret federal deal, shielded from the consequences most men would face, and backed by a network that, for reasons still not fully explained, did not abandon him. According to AP News, Epstein began rebuilding his life immediately after release. He returned to his Manhattan mansion, the same one described in the Epstein document archive as having extensive surveillance equipment and unusual room configurations. He resumed flying on his private jet. He resumed philanthropic events and social gatherings, and most disturbingly, he resumed collecting contacts. Epstein's power wasn't just money, it was access. His strength wasn't just wealth, it was proximity to politicians, to professors, to CEOs, to celebrities, to scientists, and to people who, in hindsight, realized they had no idea who Jeffrey Epstein really was. To your grandmother, to anyone far removed from elite circles, it might sound strange that a man accused of such disturbing crimes could continue to mingle with society's most powerful. But the truth is far simpler and far darker. People believed he had something they needed: money, connections, introductions, influence, information. According to People magazine, internal communications suggested that Epstein may have acted as an informant, a word that still echoes through modern investigations. Who he informed on, or what he provided, remains shrouded in secrecy. But the biggest piece of the puzzle, the one that continues to fuel political debate today, is the flight logs published by the Epstein Document Archive. These logs record the passengers on Epstein's private jet, the dates, the destinations, and sometimes the staff and pilots who accompanied them. These logs include names from both major U.S. political parties, names from academia, names from Hollywood, names from corporate America. But a name appearing in a flight log does not mean guilt. It does not imply the person knew what Epstein was doing. As GovFacts clarifies, flight log entries prove presence on a plane, nothing more. Still, to voters, to journalists, to investigators, the pattern matters because the logs show how deeply Epstein embedded himself in global power structures. At the same time, Epstein cultivated relationships with elite universities: Harvard, MIT Nobel Prize winners. He donated millions, funded research, and hosted gatherings that blended science with high society glamour. Behind closed doors, according to testimonies later uncovered by federal investigators, Epstein bragged about having compromising information on important men. Whether these claims were real or imagined, nobody knows. But people around him behaved as if they were real. And then there was the island, Little St. James, a place so isolated, so removed from oversight, that it developed a dark reputation even before the world learned the truth. Former employees, cited in AP News and CBS investigations, described visitors arriving at all hours, Epstein's strict rules about privacy, staff ordered not to look at Epstein or his guests, and surveillance cameras everywhere. Some workers were fired simply for asking questions. One employee later said, "It was like a kingdom. The king made the rules." And in that kingdom, Epstein believed the outside world could not touch him. But something changed. Quietly, slowly, relentlessly. Journalists began digging. Investigators began receiving new complaints. Victims, now adults, began speaking out. According to Time magazine, federal prosecutors in New York revisited older evidence and found discrepancies, omissions, and patterns that raised the stakes dramatically. And then, in July 2019, the illusion shattered. Epstein was arrested at Teterboro Airport after stepping off his private jet. New charges, new victims, new evidence. The world was watching now. Politicians distanced themselves. Universities released statements. Celebrities denied involvement for the first time in his life. Jeffrey Epstein faced a future he could not negotiate or charm his way out of. But that future would never come. Because less than 1 month later, Jeffrey Epstein was found dead in his jail cell. According to CNBC and Britannica's timeline, the cause was officially ruled suicide. But the circumstances, the cameras, the guards, the broken protocols, ignited a firestorm of skepticism. And with Epstein dead, the attention shifted to something he left behind. The files, the logs, the documents, the memos, the reports, the networks, the secrets. The world began asking, what did he know? Who knew him? Who protected him? Who enabled him? And why were so many documents still hidden? To answer that, we move into the next, where the political impi. When Jeffrey Epstein stepped off his plane in July 2019 and was arrested by federal agents, it felt, for a moment, as if justice had finally caught up with a man who had evaded it for decades. This arrest was different. It came from the Southern District of New York, prosecutors known for taking on the biggest cases in America. And according to Time magazine, they brought new charges based on evidence uncovered in raids of Epstein's Manhattan townhouse, including hundreds of photographs and files. For the first time, the public saw a glimpse of the world he built behind closed doors. And then, less than 1 month later, everything changed again. On August 10th, 2019, according to CNBC, Jeffrey Epstein was found unresponsive in his cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Center. The cause was officially ruled suicide, but the circumstances surrounding his death ignited a global firestorm. 2 guards assigned to check on Epstein fell asleep. Surveillance cameras malfunctioned. He was taken off suicide watch prematurely. No cellmate was present. Protocols were violated repeatedly. It was the perfect storm of coincidences, or something more. And because Epstein had ties to powerful figures on every side of politics, every theory, no matter how extreme, found an audience. But the most important question wasn't how Epstein died. It was what he left behind. When investigators entered Epstein's properties, the Manhattan mansion, the Palm Beach home, the private island, they seized documents, hard drives, photographs, logs, calendars, contact books, bank records, and much of that evidence, even years later, remains sealed. According to Business Insider, the Department of Justice and multiple administrations have refused to release large sections of Epstein-related records, citing privacy rules, ongoing legal issues, and concerns about reputational harm. But pressure began to grow. Journalists pushed. Victims demanded transparency. Lawmakers called hearings. And slowly, pieces of the puzzle began to emerge. According to Politico, in 2025, the Epstein estate turned over calendars, call logs, financial ledgers, photos, and internal schedules. to the House Oversight Committee, a committee that, for the first time, had bipartisan interest in understanding Epstein's political connections. But as these documents trickled out, something became clear. Most names in the files weren't criminals. Most weren't aware of Epstein's crimes. Many had only met him once, or not at all. According to AP News, the long-awaited Epstein files release contained far fewer bombshells than the public expected, mainly because the criminal acts had already been documented extensively in earlier court releases. But still, some questions remained unanswered. Questions about how Epstein built his wealth, who protected him in 2008, what information he traded, why he kept meticulous logs of every visitor, and whether any political figures attempted to shield him. And then came a detail that changed everything. According to People magazine, an internal 2008 FBI memo revealed that Epstein had provided information to the Bureau. The memo did not say what information, it did not say about whom. It did not say when the relationship ended. It did not say whether he was an informant, a source, or something in between. But in American politics, in a world driven by suspicion, leaks, and mistrust, even the possibility of Epstein as an intelligence asset fuels debate. Because if Epstein traded information, on who? And to protect what? And so the question stopped being about Epstein himself. It became a question about the system around him. Who helped him escape justice in 2008? Why was he handled with such caution? Why did he surround himself with politicians, academics, and celebrities? Why are so many files still sealed? And why is every administration, regardless of party, hesitant to release all the documents? To understand why the Epstein files matter in American politics today, we must explore how both parties see them, how voters view them, how the courts treat them, and why, even now, years after Epstein's death, these documents generate fear, anger, and controversy. Because the Epstein case is not just about a man, it's about a mirror that reflects how power works and how power fails. In the next part, we explore that mirror and ask the question at the heart of modern American politics: why do the Epstein files still matter today? Jeffrey Epstein is gone. Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison. Many of the crimes were committed decades ago. So why, in 2024, 2025, and now beyond, are politicians, voters, journalists, and even presidential candidates still fighting over the Epstein files? Why does a dead man's paperwork still shake Washington? To answer that, we have to step back and look at what this scandal is really about. It isn't simply a story about exploitation. It isn't simply a story about one criminal or even two. It's a story about power and who gets to wield it without consequences. First, the trust problem. Let's start with something simple, something your grandmother understands instinctively. If powerful people keep getting away with things, how can you trust the system? According to AP News and Politico, the majority of documents released so far show a disturbing pattern. The 2008 secret plea deal, the work release privileges, the 2019 jail failures, the missing logs, the broken cameras, the missing cellmate, the guards falsifying records. Every one of these failures benefited Epstein, a well-connected millionaire with friends in politics, finance, and intelligence. So the public looks at the files and asks, is the system protecting us or protecting them? This question sits at the center of U.S. politics today. Second, bipartisan distrust. In a rare twist, both political parties agree. The Epstein story smells wrong. Politico reported in 2025 that Republicans and Democrats both demanded the release of Epstein-related DOJ files. Republicans framed it as a transparency issue. Democrats framed it as a victims' rights issue. Different arguments, same conclusion. Show us the documents. In a polarized America where people disagree about everything, from immigration to taxes to what's on school library shelves, Epstein has become one of the few things everybody is suspicious about. When everyone loses trust in the system, even for different reasons, political pressure grows. Epstein's files didn't create polarization, but they did expose how deeply distrust runs. Third, the fear of blackmail. One quiet fear inside Washington, rarely spoken out loud, is the question, was Epstein running a blackmail operation? Now, let's be clear. No court has conclusively proven this theory, but the evidence suggests possibility. AP News confirmed the safe with cash, diamonds, and labeled CDs. Flight logs, as published in court exhibits, show dozens of wealthy and influential visitors. Witness testimony unsealed in the Giuffre versus Maxwell case mentions photo rooms, videos, and orders to keep everything. So, even without conspiracy theories, even without speculation, the legitimate concern remains. If Epstein collected compromising material on powerful men, what did he use it for? And who else might be using it today? This isn't salacious gossip. This is a national security question. Washington knows it, and that's why the files matter. Fourth, the victim's still waiting. Politics aside, there's something more important. The victims. Many are now middle-aged women. Some have children, some are grandmothers, but they were girls when it happened. And for decades, as Miami Herald reporting showed, their voices were ignored. The Epstein files contain testimony, travel records, visitor logs, sealed statements, names of potential witnesses, names of potential enablers. Some of these individuals may be guilty, some may be innocent but involved peripherally. Some may have been completely unaware, but the victims deserve to know who helped, who watched, who stayed silent. That's why they continue to fight in court. That's why they push Congress to unseal the documents. Because justice delayed is still injustice and the country feels it. Fourth, the victim's still waiting. Politics aside, there's something more important. The victims. Many are now middle-aged women. Some have children, some are grandmothers, but they were girls when it happened. And for decades, as Miami Herald reporting showed, their voices were ignored. The Epstein files contain testimony, travel records, visitor logs, sealed statements, names of potential witnesses, names of potential enablers. Some of these individuals may be guilty, some may be innocent but involved peripherally. Some may have been completely unaware. But the victims deserve to know who helped, who watched, who stayed silent. That's why they continue to fight in court. That's why they push Congress to unseal the documents. Because justice delayed is still injustice and the country feels it. Sixth, if we can't see the evidence, we can't trust the outcome. This is the core of the political impact. It's not the names, it's not the salacious rumors, it's not the island memes or the late-night jokes. It's something deeper. Americans believe the truth is being hidden, and when people believe the government hides the truth, democracy begins to rot. Court documents redacted, testimony sealed, logs missing notes blacked out, files lost, then found, then withheld. If Americans cannot see what really happened, they cannot trust those who are in charge. That affects elections, appointments, public policy, foreign relations, faith in institutions, and the legitimacy of government itself. Epstein's crimes were physical, but the political damage? That's psychological, that's nationwide. Seventh, the symbol, what Epstein represents now. Jeffrey Epstein is no longer just a man. He's a symbol of elite impunity, two-tier justice, secret deals, political favoritism, the erosion of public trust, and every time a new batch of documents is released, as AP News and Washington Post reported in 2025, the same questions resurface. Who else was protected? Who else knew? Who else benefited? These aren't conspiracy questions. These are accountability questions, and they aren't going away. Not now, not next year, not until the files are fully opened. 8. The final question. So why do the Epstein files matter? Because they force America to confront a hard truth. There are two systems of power in the United States, the one for ordinary people and the one for the powerful. Epstein lived in the second one. The fight for the files is the country's attempt to close that gap, to say, never again. Not this time. No more secrets for the powerful. And whether you're Republican, Democrat, independent, or uninterested in politics altogether, everyone understands that a society cannot survive if justice is optional for the wealthy and mandatory for everyone else. This is why the Epstein files matter today, because until the truth is fully known, the story isn't over, and neither is the fight for accountability. And so, as the Epstein files continue to unseal piece by piece, the real story no longer sits in a courtroom. It lives out here, in the political arena, where every disclosure becomes ammunition, every rumor becomes narrative, and every unanswered question becomes a weapon in America's cultural wars. Today, no political faction discusses the files louder or more strategically than the MAGA movement. For some of its supporters, the Epstein case symbolizes everything they distrust: elites, institutions, and a system they believe protects the powerful. And in speeches, rallies, and committee hearings, figures like Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene have pushed the story into the center of conservative messaging, arguing that if the government hides anything, then nothing it says can be trusted. The modern GOP, now reshaped by years of populist energy, sees the Epstein files as a fulcrum, a pressure point. Some use it to challenge political rivals, others to attack federal agencies, and many to rally voters around a simple, potent theme. We deserve the truth because in today's America, truth is no longer something discovered. It's something fought over. And the Epstein files have become part of that fight. A symbolic battlefield where the MAGA base, the GOP establishment, and the broader political world collide over one question. Who controls the narrative of power? For some, the files represent corruption. For others, cover-up. And for millions, they represent a deeper fear that the system is too big, too closed, and too distant to trust. But whatever side of America you stand on, MAGA, GOP, independent, or Democrat, one truth remains. You cannot heal a democracy in the dark. Sunlight must win. If you believe the truth should never depend on someone's wealth or power, hit like so this message spreads, and drop a comment saying whether you think the Epstein files should be released. Your voice matters more than you think. Subscribe if you want more breakdowns like this. Context, clarity, and consequence.